I always thought I knew who my teachers were. I mean, not really new, but you get this idea of them. They teach their subject, they go home, and maybe they have a cat or two. But what happened with my former English teacher, Mr. Donovan, flipped that image upside down in a way I'll never forget. It started on one of those gray spring afternoons in Seattle. I was on my lunch break from the small publishing internship I'd landed after college. Nothing fancy, lots of coffee runs, manuscript reading, and the occasional copywriting gig, but it kept me busy and, honestly, I liked it. That day, I decided to try a new café that had just opened down the street from my office. As I stepped inside, the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon immediately welcomed me. The place was quiet, with a gentle hum of acoustic music and the clink of ceramic mugs. I placed my order, an iced caramel latte and a turkey pesto panini, and looked around for a seat. And then I saw him. Sitting in the corner by the window was a face I hadn't seen in over 7 years, yet instantly recognized. Mr. Donovan, my high school English teacher. He looked a little older, of course. His once dark hair was peppered with gray, and there were faint lines around his eyes. But he still carried that calm, thoughtful presence I remembered so well. He was flipping through a leather-bound journal, pen in hand, and sipping something from a ceramic mug. I stood frozen for a second, the past flooding into my present. I remembered being 17, sitting in the third row of his classroom, analyzing The Great Gatsby, and secretly hoping he'd read one of my essays out loud again like he did that one time. He was one of the few teachers who saw me, not just as a student, but as someone with a voice, a story to tell. I debated whether to say something. I mean, would he even remember me? Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked over. "Excuse me, Mr. Donovan." He looked up. For a brief second, confusion flickered across his face. Then his eyes widened slightly. "Megan? Megan Hart." I smiled, surprised he remembered my name. "Yes." "Wow, I didn't think you'd remember." "Of course I do," he said warmly, closing his journal. "You wrote that incredible essay on To Kill a Mockingbird. How could I forget?" I felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. That essay had meant a lot to me. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please sit. What brings you here?" I sat down and told him about the internship, about graduating college with a degree in English Lit, and how I was trying to find my voice in the world of publishing. He listened intently, asking questions, nodding thoughtfully. Then he leaned back and said something that completely caught me off guard. "You always had a writer's soul. I knew it from the moment I read your first journal entry." I blinked. "You remember my journal?" "I do. You wrote about the feeling of walking through a bookstore like it was a sacred place." That line stuck with me. I felt my throat tighten a bit. I hadn't thought about that in years. Then he added, "I actually left teaching 2 years ago."
"What?"
"Really?" I asked, surprised. He nodded.
"Yeah."
After 20 years in the classroom, I needed a change. I've been working on a memoir and some fiction, just trying to see if I can finally tell my own story. "Mr. Donovan the novelist," I joked. He chuckled. "Just call me Ethan now." It's still weird hearing Mr. Donovan outside the classroom. We ended up talking for over an hour. It felt strange at first, this blurring of student-teacher boundaries, but not in a bad way. He wasn't my teacher anymore. We were two people who shared a love for words, crossing paths again in a city full of strangers. Before I left, he said, "Listen, Megan, I don't do this often, but I'd love to read something you've written recently. If you're comfortable sharing, that is." I hesitated, but then nodded. "I'll send you something." He handed me his card, just a simple one with his name, email, and the word writer beneath it. I walked out of that cafe with my head spinning. The encounter had been so unexpected, so grounding. It reminded me of who I was before the stress of job hunting and deadlines and bills. I was a writer. I'd always been one. Later that night, I emailed him the opening chapter of a novel I'd been working on in secret. A story about a girl growing up in a coastal town who finds out her family is hiding something. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. The next morning, I got a reply. Subject: Your chapter. Megan, I just finished reading your chapter. I don't say this lightly. You have something rare, Your voice is strong, honest, and layered. There's real depth in your characters. You've grown so much as a writer. I'd love to meet again and talk more about it. If you're open to it, maybe we could start a writing exchange. A couple pages a week. Keep each other accountable. Let me know. I'd be honored.
Ethan.
I sat there staring at the email, speechless. This man, my former high school teacher, someone I had deeply respected, wanted to be my writing partner. Over the next few months, we met every other Saturday. Sometimes at the café, sometimes at the local library. We exchanged pages, critiqued each other's work, and talked about everything from character arcs to the pros and cons of self-publishing. He was working on a deeply personal memoir about growing up with an alcoholic father and how teaching saved him from falling into the same patterns. His writing was raw, emotional, and at times, difficult to read. But it was powerful. Through our sessions, I saw Ethan not as my teacher, but as a human being. He shared his vulnerabilities, his failures, and his dreams. And in return, I found the courage to share mine. One Saturday, after I'd shared a particularly emotional chapter about losing my mom to cancer when I was 19, he looked at me with genuine compassion. You write grief like someone who's walked through fire and came out holding a pen. That line made me cry. It was the first time someone had put my pain into words that made it feel like something beautiful. Eventually, I finished the first draft of my novel. I printed it out, placed it in a binder, and gave it to Ethan. He held it in his hands like it was a sacred object. I'm proud of you, Megan. Truly. I didn't know it then, but that moment would be one I'd carry with me forever. A year later, I got an offer from a small indie publisher. They wanted my book. I called Ethan the moment I found out, and he shouted so loud on the phone I'm pretty sure his neighbors heard. At my book launch, he came early, sat in the front row, and asked the very first question during the Q&A. Afterward, when I signed his copy, I wrote, "To Ethan, thank you for reminding me who I am. I owe you more than you'll ever know." That unexpected encounter in the cafe wasn't just a reunion. It was a turning point, a moment that reminded me that the people who change our lives often circle back when we need them most. And sometimes, a teacher stops being just a teacher and becomes something even more profound, a guide, a mirror, a friend. I often think back to that first day in the cafe. If I had walked past him, if I had hesitated just a little longer, would any of this have happened? Life doesn't always give us second chances. But sometimes, when it does, they leave you speechless.